thank you so much for joining us, Marco. I'm excited to have you here today. I've been looking forward to this episode. I think you'll be able to bring a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge to our listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much for having me.
So to kind of get started, before we get into the podcast and dive into it, I want to ask you if you felt the earthquake yesterday.
No, I slept through it.
You slept through it. Okay. So where do you reside right now in New York?
I am on the corner of 86th Street and Central Park West.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So
I should have felt it, but I didn't. I was asleep.
Yeah. I wonder like how much it was, I guess, in the area you were at, because I'm on like the east side of Manhattan, and I felt it maybe for like 5 seconds. It was like slow, like shake. But at first I was like, what is that? Like I did not expect it to be an earthquake, because I'm like there's in the past, I've heard that there was an earthquake like in New York area, upstate or New York, but I never felt that. It came in the news. It was like, oh, there was like an earthquake. So when it happened, I was like,
well, were you here for the one in 2011? Because a lot of people that I know that were here for that said it was similar, but also very small.
I was upstate back then, so not closer to here. One of my buddies that was in New Jersey, he was also sleeping, but he said he woke him up because, I mean, New Jersey was a lot.
Right.
That's where it hit, apparently. Yeah. Cool. So kind of diving into, our topic here, I want to usually start from the beginning of your journey. I want to focus on the high school time, usually the third, fourth year, because that's around the time where we're thinking of, what major I want to choose, what school I want to go to, and whether from your outside influences or what you're learning you're in school, you're like, hey, this excites me. I want to go into this type of career path, right? So before we get into that, first I want to ask you a question. If somebody asked you, how would you describe in 1 or 2 words your background / proficiency or expertise? What would you say?
I would say I'm a trained computer scientist. Okay. I studied computer science in school. I have a lot of other interests that factor into what I do on a day-to-day at work, but I'm a computer scientist fundamentally. That's how I would say it.
Nice. That's awesome. So now kind of diving back, going back to the high school time, right? Let's say it's your junior year, senior year. I want to know, knowing that now, you kind of identify yourself as a computer scientist. Back then, how did you find out about computer science, right? And how did you kind of find your love and interest for computer science?
So I was always very good at math. When I was very young, I was always placed into higher math classes, and I generally had a proficiency for mathematics. Other subjects, not so much, but mathematics for sure. And about around the same time, I was also at the time, not so much anymore, but at the time developing an interest in playing games, computer gaming. So as one does when one likes to game and set stuff up and play with your friends, you're always like doing these little projects that really are very low level tech projects, setting up servers for your friends or, opening up your networking for whatever reason you need. So that's how it all started. And then at one point, my school offered a computer science class, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. We were at the time when we were supposed to start picking majors, so I said, I'm going to go sign up for it. And I actually hated it.
Really?
Yeah, I really hated it. And in hindsight, it was a lot of the way it was taught and the languages, but I really disliked it. So I thought, let me give it another shot, because this is not for me.
By the way, when you say by the way it was taught, do you mean like the topics that they were teaching, or just the instructors and how they went about teaching those?
Teaching introductory programming to someone who knows nothing about it is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that in hindsight. So I think it was just the language that they used to explain the problems, and some of the techniques were not to my learning style. They might have been to someone else's, but they weren't to mine. And the language that we used, I couldn't write code in it today if you asked me to. It was a very strange choice.
It's probably outdated now.
Probably outdated, yeah. So I decided to give it another shot, and we learned it was Visual Basic.
Okay.
So, not the most fancy or cool language, But being able to make small things was like kind of interesting. And I got a book after that actually sold like, okay, I don't know that I'm going to enjoy this, but I seem to be good at this. So let me study the thing that I'm very good at. And that's how I kind of decided to go into computer science.
Wow.
It was more of a, oh, it's not something aspirational, like this is what I see myself making a career.
Right.
It's more, this is something I seem to have a knack for and I seem to be good at. So let me study something that I would be good at. So it's not going to be extremely difficult.
Got it. And I think that's like a good way of thinking about it. Like you found an interest and you found something that you were enjoying a little bit and you were like, let me dig a little bit deeper. Let me do a little bit of my own studying and look into it and, you know, see where it goes kind of.
Yeah.
And kind of looking back at what you said about, you know, the way now you see it, if somebody's teaching computer science to someone that, you know, knows zero about it, you know, it's a hard thing to teach.
It's very
and
hard.
I think that's like, from like an instructor point of view, I think that's important for, you know, instructors to know that, because like they almost have to put themselves in the shoe of somebody who knows nothing. Now, how would you teach that to somebody? Almost like they say, what, like, you know, imagine you're teaching it to like a low kid, like, you know, with the most basic language, how would you teach that?
Yeah, it's difficult because when you start thinking like a computer programmer or even a computer scientist more broadly, you have to understand that the computer, if it's working well, will do exactly what you tell it to do. But that also means you have to tell it exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And you can't really make a lot of assumptions with that. And getting into the mindset of thinking that way is not immediately intuitive unless you already have prior experience and exposure. So learning that plus learning a language on how to express that, I think those are the two big challenges when you start in computer science. And that can be difficult to teach. And the people are going to have their own ways of learning it, different learning styles. So what works for me might not work for someone else. But
what was your, I guess, best way of learning for you?
Through doing. Okay. I don't undervalue the education that I got because in a lot of ways that actually separated me as a professional. But for me, I learned the best through books and through solving problems. So one of my very first books, and I still have it. I've gotten rid of most of my computer science books, but I still have it for the sentimental value. Is like a book on the C programming language from, I don't even remember the author, but it was the first book that I actually worked through.
Yeah.
I read through it. I did all the examples. I studied it. And I did all of the exercise, the homework, quote unquote. Like, you know, who does homework in their free time, right? But I'm doing all the homework to try and learn it and prove to myself that I know it. And that's how I learned, through actually solving the problems. If you don't solve something, you think about it, you look it up, that type of a thing.
You were pretty self-motivated.
In that sense, I was. Yeah. And if I'm honest, in that moment, I don't really know why I was, but in that sense, yeah. I do have a fascination for how things work, but not just technical. So that might have been part of the reason why.
Nice. So when you say computer science, the book that you were learning, right? Or sorry, when you said C language that you were learning, that was the first book. For those that don't know, you know, I know that there's C# and there's C++. C++,
yeah.
So what is the difference of that? And when you say C language, does that combine all the C languages, or?
So with those in particular, there is a relationship. The C language was, of that grouping, it was the first one. And it's considered generally a low-level general purpose language. C++ and C# were extensions of it. They added on to it. C++ went in the direction of what's called object orientation, which is adding objects. And C# did a similar thing. It also added objects, but it was built to work with the Microsoft application framework. Right?
Got it.
My technical details might be a bit off because it's not my field anymore in that sense, but that's the general gist.
Right. And they're always changing.
Always changing.
Yeah, you never know. So after you said you took that one class, you know, it wasn't the best, you know, way of instructor teaching and whatnot, but you found your own motivation to, like, you know, read the book, do your own problem solving. Did you say you took a second class in high school? For that?
So that was the Visual Basic one, which kind of but solidified, like, this is interesting enough. It's not my passion, but it's interesting enough, and I seem to be good at it.
Was that your junior year? Do you remember, or senior year?
That was my junior year. Yes. And then in my senior year, I decided I took an AP class. It was one of the only 2 AP classes I took, and that was AP Computer Science. And that kind of solidified my thinking that, at least for the time being, this is the approach.
Yeah.
So AP Computer Science, and I did very well in that class. And that was kind of like, okay, so you made the right choice, at least in the near term, with what you're doing.
And that kind of, would you say that like solidified like because that's around the time where like, you know, you have to be thinking about colleges, majors. Would you say like you took that class, the AP class, and through that you're like, hey, this is what I want to go to school for?
Well, it's interesting. So in my junior year, I had this kind of rebellious thing where I said, I don't want to go to college at all.
Okay.
I thought it was a waste of time, and I was like, there's no reason to do this. This is a waste of money, a waste of time. I'm done with school. I did not like school. I liked a lot of my teachers and I liked a lot of my friends, but I did not like the way school was set up.
Where did that thinking of yours, I guess, came from? Like, why did you start?
Honestly, it was just it was a hard time in my life, probably.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's like I was just taking it out on everything. So I didn't want to go to college, and my mom, she was, of course, not too happy about that. But she basically, the way she convinced me is she said, "Why don't you just apply? Pick a couple schools and just apply. You don't have to go, but just apply and see if you get in." So I applied for 2 schools, and I got in immediately to one, and I got in with a partial scholarship. Like it was like immediate decision. I didn't have to wait. And it was surprising. They're like, "You're very qualified. You know, we're happy to admit you."
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa. And it was in New York City, which was very close. I lived in PA at the time, very close. Nice. So it was close. It would have been close to family. It was like a very natural, it made it very easy. It was low friction. So because it was low friction, I said, okay, I don't want to, but I'll do it. Sometimes you have to do the things you don't want to do. I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
And what school was that in New York?
So at the time, it's had many different names in the last 10, 15 years. At the time, it was called the Polytechnic Institute of NYU.
Okay.
It was a university that was in Brooklyn. It was apparently the original engineering schools in New York. And NYU had acquired it, or had agreed to acquire it right before I joined. They finished the acquisition process a year or 2 after I joined.
Damn.
But my degree says NYU on it.
Nice.
So it was effectively NYU without it being NYU. So
it all worked
nowadays, if you look it up, it's called the Tandon School of Engineering. It's named after one of the donors.
Got it.
But it's in Brooklyn.
Nice. Wow. I mean, it all worked out, and New York has a good reputation too. So after that, you get into school, you get the partial scholarship, and that kind of changed your point of view. And you're like,
if I'm being honest, I didn't want to. I was still kind of like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You have to be honest with yourself. I was very much like, I don't want to do this. There's no reason to. But
what did you have, I guess, as a plan if you weren't going to go?
I was going to go to like a community school for like an apprenticeship, just to learn enough.
Yeah.
And then through that, use that to go into a job and go into the workforce. I always knew you had to have a job and you had to work, but I really did not like school. I would learn in hindsight that a lot of that was because I wasn't studying the things I wanted to learn.
Got it.
But back then I really didn't. So I just thought college was a continuation. It's not, it's very different in a lot of good ways. And that's why I was like, I don't want to do this.
That's such a key thing that you said, that, that in hindsight, when you look back, the reason that you didn't want to go to college was probably because you were learning the things you weren't interested in and you didn't want to learn. That's such a key thing, because that's where I feel like a lot of other kids and students experience the same thing. I mean, there were times I experienced a similar thing where I'm like, this is not fun. Like, I'm learning a lot of things that I'm never going to use. And so that's very important. And I'm glad you shared that, because I feel like there's a lot of people that experience that too. And
yeah. I agree completely. And on top of that, I think one thing that high schools could benefit from is adopting the collegiate way of scheduling, because when you study the same 8 subjects every single day, you have no breaks. You have to do homework every night. And I don't think you ever really internalize much without doing extra studying. So it's repetitive, redundant work.
Right.
With collegiate scheduling, you have like 2 classes, like a class, if you have a computer science class, you'll do it twice a week for an hour and a half. and then they can give you like a longer, more thorough homework exercise for you to do the next week, and you can plan it when you want. I'm going to wait till Friday, or I'm going to do it on Thursday. You know, it doesn't matter. And that is more how the real world works anyways. So college mimics that more. And high school does not. Having to do homework for every class every single night is not only not really realistic, it's demoralizing.
Yeah, that's well said. That is very well said. And you know, the way more I think about it is like college should be the time where you're already kind of prepared. You're already ready for that rhythm, that schedule. Now, the more I think about high school, it's like the less I try to figure out like what was high school for really, right? Like high school, I agree with you. It should be setting you up, getting you used to the structure of college. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of times, especially if somebody played a sport too in high school, you go to school, you get out at like 4 around that time, you go to school. By the time you get home from your sports, it's like 7:38, and then you have like 8 subjects of homework to do. I mean, it's just like, it's not realistic.
Yeah, and of course, it starts really early in the morning, usually a lot earlier than work starts for some people. So you can't stay up late if that's your thing. It's very restrictive. And I think that's more what I had a problem with than the actual school itself. So...
Yeah, and another thing on the same page, I guess, as, you know, high school should be kind of preparing you for college, whether it's with the structuring or the rhythm and the day-to-day, how your high school, for example, provided the computer science class. I do think that if high schools provided more classes that mimicked, you know, what you could go into for college and for studying, it would give students a better, I guess, outlook on what, you know, they could go into on career paths, perhaps. Because like, I guess like 4 years of college, you know, math is good to learn, science is good to learn, history, these things are good. But to learn them multiple years in a row, if somebody doesn't have an interest in it, I think, you know, there should be a wider range of subjects and topics, and a lot more of what's being taught in college, you know, offered in high school, kind of giving students, you know, kind of like outlook, like, hey, this is what you could go into. Because I went into college kind of like, wow, I didn't even know this major existed. I didn't know this minor existed. I didn't know like this career path existed.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you don't enjoy a subject, it's a lot easier to get through it if you only have it for 1 hour twice a week than it is if you have it for 45 minutes every single day. That's a way of, it's like suffering in a way, right? So if you really don't enjoy a subject, you could be like, okay, like I have it only on these 2 days for 2 hours. I could get through that, and you know, I'll be okay. You know, I could get through this, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it's good building.
Yeah. So you eventually decided to, hey, I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna accept in New York University, or what it was at the time. I'm gonna accept the offer. Right? Was that your decision, or did you have your mom?
I mean, I if I'm being honest, like I said, it's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I still did it. And I chose to do it because I could have said, no, screw this. I'm going to go do my own thing. You know, I did choose to do it, but yeah, it was very much what my mom wanted. And I said, you know, I already did 18 years of schooling in my life. I could go. Or however much it was.
Looking back at it, do you think that was a good choice? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. You know, I don't know if I could say I necessarily enjoyed the whole process.
Yeah.
But it was a good investment, and it was worthwhile. Yeah. I mean, the rest of my trajectory in many ways was defined by lots of things that happened in school. So if I had not gone to school, impossible to say. I don't know that I would have still become a computer science professional or a consultant, but it definitely would have been a very different road.
Yeah. So when you start school, you said you lived in the Pennsylvania area.
Right. I moved to New York for school.
You moved to New York for school. I want to ask you how your experience was going to, you know, school in a big city like New York City. Was where I went to school was much smaller, you know, more quiet, more suburban. But New York City, I mean, you know, it's got to be different going to college here. So I wanted to ask about how your experience was with that. And as well as just your first year, as a freshman in New York.
Lots of comments. So I would say one of the first things, the biggest difference I would say, is you don't really have a campus in the traditional sense of a campus. technically at the time, NYU was not fully integrated with the school. So we could have accessed NYU classes and amenities, but in general, it was more about the Brooklyn campus, which was really 4 buildings around a park. So no campus,
Yeah.
right? It's like you spend your whole time when you're studying in one of 2 buildings or the dorm.
Yeah. Or the park.
And that's something I would have liked if I had had a campus, because I've visited campuses since, and I've visited friends at campuses.
Yeah.
So that's one thing people need to keep in mind. It's not a campus, but it's New York.
Yeah.
So it's like you have literally the whole city at your doorstep, and it's amazing. Like New York's polarizing, right? People love it or they hate it. There's no in between. I love New York. So being in New York was incredible and amazing. Getting to, take the subway and go anywhere in the city, go to Times Square. A lot of my family lives in New York. So getting to visit them all the time. It was one of the best things about going to college. Was living in New York.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point of view you bring up to like students that could perhaps be, considering coming to New York City for school, because that's a big give and take. Like you're giving away the campus and that kind of campus feel, having like a kind of area for your school, but at the same time, what you're getting back, it's like the best city in the world. Being able to, like you said, go anywhere within the subway system in New York. I mean,
it's affordable, even for a college student. So you have access to everything. And on top of that, one thing that's also a good and a bad is there's a lot of students who don't live on campus because it's New York. They live with either their family in Manhattan or in the Bronx, or they're living in an apartment with 4 friends.
Yeah.
So you get the opportunity naturally to experience more of the city. There is the negative of that in that there's a lot of people who don't live in the dorm with you. So some of them won't be able to work with you as late or stay with you as long or whatever the case is versus a traditional campus experience. But overall, it was great.
Right.
And I mean, I've lived in New York ever since. I don't have any intention of leaving anytime soon.
You love it.
I mean, I could definitely see myself living somewhere else for a while to try it, but I think I'll always come back to New York.
You'll have like a permanent home here. You'll go visit and you'll come back.
I'm a New Yorker through and through.
Yeah. When I first moved to a city, I didn't think I could do it. I mean, it was just so overwhelming. And especially coming from like a quieter place, like upstate, came to a city and I was like, oh my God, like I was in my room trying to go to the city. You hear cars still, you're hearing, sirens. But then after, I would say like 6 months, 8 months, like I got used to it. Now I'm in the same situation as you where I can't see myself leaving. Like when I go visit back home, I'm like, damn, it's too quiet here. Like I want to go back to a city. So during your, I guess your college year, your freshman year as a computer science major, what type of classes are you guys taking? What should one expect to be taking that first year? Is it more generalized classes? Do you guys get to, be in some computer science classes and test that out? What is that experience like?
So every school is going to be different. In my school, it's an engineering school. That's what they bill themselves as. They're a engineering school. So there's a lot of introduction to engineering and engineering principles that are very general, very broad. That plus a math class, a science class, and 1 or 2 computer science classes. I took only 1 because I scored high enough on my AP test to not have to take the introductory
to get that score. And then
right. So I only did the 1. But in general, the way I've noticed it at my school is your first year, you don't really take that many classes in your major.
Right.
But that slowly reverses as time goes on. And in the very last years, you're only taking computer science classes. Yeah. So you need the fundamentals and the bare basics, and they don't want to overwhelm you. So you're taking a lot of other general classes. Yeah. My degree did have requirements for like general electives and science electives and math classes. So that followed for a little bit, but it wasn't anything unreasonable or overwhelming.
Right. And you'll probably get those done like your first couple of years. And then,
first 2 years.
It'll become more computer science.
You still will have free electives that you could spend on computer science classes or other classes if you want. But that's in general the way it worked.
Yeah. So going through your first year, second year, taking the general electives and whatnot, and you start to kind of test with the computer science classes. Was there that taking those classes, did that reinforce your idea that, hey, this is the path I want to be in? Or was that any point where you were like, I don't think you would say that it was too hard because you say, you loved it and you were studying it. But was there at any point where you were like, I don't know if I want to go to computer science? Should I try taking classes from other majors to test those out?
Computer science is a very broad field.
Okay.
Very, very broad. There are computer programmers, people who work in computer networking. There's IT. It's such a huge field. And when you enter into computer science, it's generally the same. You start out learning computer programming. I knew that if I was going to work in computers, it would be something with programming. I didn't know in what area, because I very much liked C. Maybe it's because it was my first language. I don't know. At the time, I really liked it.
Is that is that one of the languages where you would say it's used most?
Not really anymore.
No? Okay.
No, it is. It's used, but not super common.
Got it.
And I kept finding barriers. Things like, if you want to use C, you have to do this field, which I didn't really care about. Or, if you want to go into this area, you have to then take all these extra classes I didn't want to do. So I knew it was going to be something with programming. I didn't know what.
Yeah.
Because all the things that kept presenting themselves didn't really interest me. It wouldn't be until my sophomore year when I basically got like an opportunity for like a freelance thing that shaped me, that pushed the direction.
Got it.
But in my freshman year, I didn't really know.
So how did you come about that? So second year, I'm assuming the summer after your sophomore year, right? Is that when you got the freelance work?
It was more, no, I was doing freelancing while I was in college.
Oh, you were in college. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you come upon that freelance work?
I was through a connection. At the time, I was spending a lot of time with my cousin. He lived in the city. His roommate's sister was the digital creative director of an ad agency, and she was looking for someone who was like trained in computer science, who could help them with a couple projects that they had in the agency. And she gave my name and said, why don't you just talk to him and see what it would be? And it's like, I had only done summer jobs, like a high school summer job side. There was a level of intimidation, but I said, you know what? Why not? I'll give it a shot. I'll try it. Worst comes to worst, I interview them and it doesn't work out.
Right. What do you have to lose? I mean, worst comes to worst, it's you get some experience in interviewing, and damn, that's awesome. Especially as like a sophomore student. I remember I went to like career fairs as a sophomore, and it was intimidating.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of hard, because you're still, everybody knows your freshman year, you're kind of taking general classes. So as a sophomore, like you got to be really selling yourself to like get anything.
Well, I was very honest with them.
Right.
I told this person, I said, I am still learning. I don't have a lot of experience, but I am, if we can help, we can work it and it's mutually beneficial, then we can find something.
Right.
So that's how I set it up, basically.
Nice. So you were at that freelance for a semester, 2 semesters?
I freelanced with them until my senior year of college.
Oh, damn. So it was like a continuous thing for
Yes.
years. So those few projects that they mentioned went on for a while, or did they keep you for more projects?
I mean, I ended up hiring there after college too.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it was it was interesting. I don't think at the time that they hired me, they really knew how to use me. And I don't say that in any negative way. It's very difficult to find when you're, I guess, let me start like this. So they were specialists and they did a lot of really great work in the print space, in the TV space, and in there's one other that I'm forgetting, but that agency was recognized as like a leader in advertising in those areas. Okay. And they were wanting to go into digital more, banner ads, the whole thing 15 years ago. And when you bring in somebody who doesn't know anything about advertising and doesn't know anything about Flash or anything like that, because back then that's what we used.
Yeah.
It's, how do you really use someone like me? But over the 2 years that I was freelancing while I was taking classes, we kind of figured it out.
Nice. Damn, that's a pretty lucky thing, I would say, to be
Very
able to
lucky.
like find that connection. And again, that's I want to emphasize on how important it is to create connections, like while you're
Very.
in school, because like if you're just gonna go interview for a job without a connection, you're competing against so many people. But if you're creating connections, like that connection, their word for you can go a long way, almost like a reference. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think that as people, we tend to be very accommodating in a negative way. Like, I can't do this for you because I don't have the skills to do it. And I think that when people are hiring in general, they know you're not going to be able to do everything that they ask. But the expectation is that you'll be honest with them, you learn it, and you figure it out.
right,
So if you walk in and you don't say disparagingly, but you say very humbly, look, I'm still learning. This is what I can do. Is there anything we could do to work out something? Or is there some work that I could do for you that would be beneficial?
right,
If people have a good idea of the work that they want to do, it's generally going to work out.
right,
Or they'll be very honest and say, no, it's not going to fit. And then you don't want to be there because
right.
then it's going to only be negative for you. So as long as you're very honest from a humble point of view, not negative, it'll generally work out.
Yeah, I think like having a good attitude and willingness to learn and being able to be like a people's person, I think goes a way longer way than someone who's like really smart but can't fit within a team, can't really work with them, doesn't want to like adapt to
No,
the
yeah.
culture. Like it's not gonna really work. And there's definitely, I would say, employers out there that on both sides, and some of them will benefit, some of them won't really benefit. As
Yeah,
much.
yeah. It depends on your culture in the company. And this was a small agency. Like I think at our biggest, we were like 40 people or something like that. So when you are in a very small company that's very like nimble, you need to be able to put on a lot of hats and adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you said that you did that internship through till your senior year of college. I'm sure that gave you a lot of experience for school, school
Yeah.
projects, school work, right? Like you're getting good experience.
Yeah.
Did you do any other internships or
No.
freelance? Because that probably took up your time, right?
Also, if I'm being honest, I was a little irresponsible with it.
Okay.
I didn't know that I was going to take this into a full-time job after, and I kind of was just coasting in college, like doing the coursework, following through on my classes. I wasn't really fully prepared. So I got lucky, if I'm being very honest, with this converting into a full-time job, but I didn't do any others.
So your school didn't have.
They did. I just didn't go to them.
Wait, you thought I was going to say career fairs, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you didn't
sorry,
go to
were
career
you not?
No. Well, I was going to say, did they have requirements of number of like internships that you
No.
had to graduate? They didn't have those.
No, none.
Okay.
Only coursework.
Got it. So I guess at the time that career fairs are coming up, you don't want to go to
All my friends
them.
are going and I'm not. Yeah.
But at the same time, you said that you didn't know that you were going to take that internship as a full time afterwards, right?
I didn't. I didn't know it. I never planned on working there full time. I was doing it literally as a way to make some money and get experience.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was about to start my last semester of my senior year that it hit me. I have no plans for work. And I'm like, I'm screwed. Literally, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, like where is the next
And
career
for
fair?
whatever reason, I don't know why, it never dawned on me to consider working at that place full time. And I think it's just like you get stuck in a way of thinking and it just doesn't click to you. And what happened was the person who'd hired me, that connection was no longer at the company anymore. So they weren't really utilizing me, which was fine. Like I said, I never intended for it to be permanent, but I had built so many good relationships with many of them that they had invited me to their Christmas party.
Okay, nice.
So I went to the Christmas party and it was good to see all the friends I'd made there and I was socializing with them. And the person who replaced her met me. And we were talking and he basically was like, he told me he was very impressed by me. He said, what you've done, I had no idea. I don't know if maybe there was no communication or whatever, but he said that he didn't know who I was. And now that he met me, he wanted to know more about me. And he said that he wanted someone full time
For that position.
for like a bigger position. He said he wanted a lead developer at this agency and they didn't have that. They only had a bunch of other developers. So he said, I want to talk to you to see if that's something you could do because you've worked here already. Other people speak very highly of you. Let's talk. If I hadn't gone to that party, that would have never happened.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And this was the part that was very interesting. When we were talking, he said, we really need someone to start right away. And I'm like, I have 4 months left of school. I can't drop out of school with 4 months left. My mom would, God forbid.
So 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years, all the money that was spent, right? So he said, well, is there a way you could work part-time? Mm-hmm. So I basically set up my college schedule. I worked on this and I set it up where I had no classes on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I had all my classes from 9 to 12 on Monday and Wednesday. So I said, if I could do like 4 days of a week,
right?
Could we do that? And he said, yeah. So what they did was they written me up an offer letter, which was basically, here's going to be your full-time salary. But until you can do that, we're going to prorate it for 4 days a week. And then you just come in when you're not in class. And I started full-time work basically in my last semester of college in March, basically, of 2013.
That's amazing. That's probably one of the best case scenarios that could have happened.
One of the reasons why I seized that was not only like I just got an offer placed onto my lap at a company I know that I've worked at, right? It was also, I had nothing else.
Right.
And the prospects were not looking good because before I went to that Christmas party, I had some connections to set me up at an interview with a big firm, really, really big firm. And I went there and they basically told me, yeah, you're pretty good, but you're new. You don't know anything. So our only offer that we could give you is like for an unpaid internship. And I'm like, unpaid internship. Wow. Okay. That's a step back.
Yeah. It's like I'm out as soon as I heard unpaid.
Yeah. Like unpaid internship. Right. And we'll take you and it's a big firm. So you'll get good experience. And then like a couple weeks later, this happens and it's like an offer for like decent money. Right. And it's a job that I know. Right. It's people that I know. How could I say no? So I signed that night and I sent it back. I was like, yeah, you got it. Here we go.
You have a week to think. You're like, nope, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Damn, that's awesome. So you started full-time with them after graduating and probably one of the best cases that could have happened to you. Because you had the connection, you already had, you knew the atmosphere, you knew the company, you knew the people. How long were you at that company for after joining them?
So that was in March of 2013, and I was there until February of 2019. So about 6 years.
Oh, wow. Long time.
6 years after freelancing. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So you started as a lead developer, and you were essentially a lead developer during those years, correct?
Yeah.
How did you like your experience there? And I kind of want to get an outlook of, what was your day-to-day like as a lead developer, in your first full-time job?
Sure. I'll answer those in reverse.
Yeah.
So my day-to-day, we worked on projects, which meant that the volume of work at the agency was it was oscillating. There would be sometimes days where we wouldn't really have much going on if we didn't have a lot of projects, which meant it was kind of like free time a little bit. Constructive free time, obviously, but free time. And then we would be like, okay, your clients want you to make 4 or 5 different landing pages or 4 or 5 websites. So at the start, the job was very much coding, like a lot of like building websites, building landing pages, coding websites for clients. I would get projects from them, websites from them to then add things to. So that's how it started. After that, about maybe a couple years later, the role kind of evolved, kind of by my pushing and kind of by my managers pushing to be a little bit more consultative, where I would meet with clients and we might not end up working on a digital project together, but I could advise them on a way to set up multiple projects that link together, or how can we connect some CMS or some sales property that they have to a larger system. It became more consultative. But in the beginning, it was a lot of straight up coding, just coding websites, HTML, CSS, PHP, all that stuff.
Which of those two phases did you enjoy more?
Oh, the consulting.
The consulting?
Much more.
So that was much less of you actually doing the work and more kind of solving the problems for them and suggesting what they need to do and whatnot, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I think what I really liked about consulting is while I was good at what I did, I knew I was not great. I would never say I'm an amazing programmer, right? It does not interest me enough to be able to spend the time in it to become great and cultivate it and maintain that. What I would say is something I'm great at is I'm really great at helping people with problems that they have and using the arsenal of things that I've learned to help solve those problems. So I can sit in a room with people and they could tell me, you know, here's this issue we're having, or here's this problem we're having. We have this goal. We want to be able to sell this product or whatever. And I can come up with solutions and help them find the plan that they want to execute and work with people who are great programmers to execute it, right? I like to work in a way where the people who I'm working with are great at what they do and I'm great at what I do, because then we're all in flow together, versus if sometimes you have to put on a hat that you're not super comfortable with and you make it work, but it's not sustainable long term.
Right. Being able to kind of like having different puzzle pieces, everybody's good at something and putting them together. Nice. So after, you know, you said you were there for about 6 years. Let's take a look at that time, right? So 6 years you worked there, you gained more experience, you became a little bit of a consultant in computer science. What are you thinking then? And, you know, I want to know what made you think of, you know, your next step.
So it was a lot of different things. So if I had to start, I would say about 2 years before I went on to my next job, I was getting kind of done with programming. I did not want to continue developing it, and I felt like I was at the ceiling of what I could do.
Whether with programming or consulting?
With programming, okay. with specifically with programming, with writing websites, writing websites and making websites. But I didn't really know where I was going to go next or what to do next. And then there was this very foundational moment where I got called in to my manager's office one day, and he said, "Congratulations, you're getting a raise." And I said, "Great. I'd never gotten a raise before. It was my first time getting a raise." So he said, "It's going to be like 2%, like $5,000. And of course, I have no qualification of what that is. So I'm very fantastic. You know, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it." And then I get home and I'm thinking about it and I pull out my spreadsheets. I start doing the numbers and I'm like, I've been here for like 4 or 5 years. This really is not a lot of money.
I got screwed.
And well, I wouldn't say that personally. It's a small agency, so they can't do a whole lot in general. But I didn't view it like they screwed me. I felt like I don't know that this is what I want to be making.
Gotcha.
That's more how I viewed it. So I said, I'm going to ask for more. So I basically wrote up this letter, and I basically said, you know, I'm really appreciative of the raise that you gave me, but I would like to review my compensation. And my manager was like, sure, you know, here's some time. I wrote up an 11-page document.
Oh my God. Okay.
Which was basically, here is everything I do for you under the responsibilities of my job title. Here's everything else I do. Here's what it should be. Right. And I sent it to him. And when I sat down in his office, he had this stack that I'd written in front of him. And he was like, yeah, I read it. And I'm just like, yeah, and we had a discussion. And I looked him dead in the eyes. And I said, I'd like $100,000 more.
Okay.
That's what I said. I said, you know, I looked up my value and I did not overestimate. I said, this is what I would be making at a big firm. I know that we're not a big firm, but this is what I'd like. And he was like, well,
did you actually say I want 100,000 more?
I did.
Okay.
I did. That's what I said. And he's like, well, obviously, like, I need to like look this over. Right. You know, he said, you're asking for way more than 100%. I'm like, I know, you know, I said, I understand. I was very confident about it. I wasn't very cocky or anything. I was like, this is the value that I bring to the agency. And this is what I would like. He said, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to need some time to get back to it. I said, that's fine. And I didn't say anything else. He then, about 2 weeks later, he took me to lunch. And he said he could not make sense of a lot of what I said in the letter because he did not have a technical background. But he had lunch with one of his friends who did. And they basically told him, keep this person.
Wow.
They said, like, you don't want to lose someone like this. So he's like, so I already know I'm going to tell you, and you already know, we're obviously not going to be able to give you what you want, but we're going to give you something.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. I said, that's fine. Like, I'm willing to work with you. And about a week later, he then called me in his office and he said they'd give me 20%. So that felt pretty good. But there was a stipulation there. And that's the reason why I'm telling this story, which is he said, but we're going to want to use more of your skills with clients. We're going to want you to consult more because that's really where you shine. And they recognize that.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing I got from that company. And the best thing they did for me was they recognized that talent that I had. And they said, we want to put you in front of clients more because you're good at it and you could thrive in that. And that's a way that, we can give you this money. So I said, sure. A year later, I had this big pitch. We were pitching this company for their business. And they were a very interesting company. They were very specialized, extremely niche. And they were very good at what they did, but they had a very old website. And they were very resistant. Admittedly so. You're very good at what you do. Right. Why would you want to change, right? I totally understand their point of view. Very resistant to a new website. So we prepared a lot, and I studied a lot. And I was like, this is my first really big meeting as part of a pitch. I'd always been like, we already have the business, so I could go in with confidence and help you. This was, we are pitching them. We might not get their business. So there's a level of like stress in that, right? So I prepared, I studied, and there were a lot of things that went wrong with the process, but we did it and we got the business. And that's what made me begin to think, maybe this is what I could be doing instead. This could be lucrative for me because I don't like programming, but I seem to have a knack for this consulting thing. I don't want to continue developing programming. In computer science, you have to constantly keep up with it because it evolves so quickly. So I said, maybe this is something that I could do. I started to explore the possibility, and then I got an email in my inbox from a Google recruiter saying, have you ever thought about working at Google? And I was like, no, I haven't. But what would that...
Was this without you reaching out?
Like I did not. It was a cold call from a Google recruiter. And I said, I haven't thought about working at Google because I thought it was all programmers. Yeah. But if you think there's room for some type of a consultant type thing, we could have a conversation. And that was how I ended up eventually leaving that job.
Wow. That is getting like a message from a Google recruiter, without trying, like that is a nice message to open up. For, I guess, what would be like your suggestion, I guess, I didn't know that, I expected, somebody getting to Google is like, they make connections, they network, right? You got in kind of them reaching out to you and introducing yourself. What would be your suggestion to a student that kind of wants to get at least an interview to Google? What's like the best way?
In what sense? In like the sense of like someone who's pursuing Google and they want to get interviewed by Google, or more like how it happened to me?
No, like someone who's in computer science major and they want to become like a programmer at Google, and they're doing their applying, but what can they do to raise their chances, I guess, to stand out? Because it is very competitive, right? And
it is competitive.
Biggest tech companies.
What can they do to stand out? I would say your computer science foundations need to be very good. You need to be very, very strong in computer science, and that should be demonstrated. But Google also likes a broad, breadth of experience. As a student, you don't have that.
You're right.
So what I would say instead is demonstrate your breadth through your projects and through your work and lean on that. Don't talk about, the very unique thing that you did on this one thing. Talk about the different people you worked with, different clients you worked with, and then lean in on the actual projects and say, I built this XYZ thing. Because hiring as a consultant is going to be different than hiring as a software engineer. So if you're going to go as a software engineer, you should lean more on the tech. But you do want to demonstrate breadth. As a consultant, you want to demonstrate both. You want to demonstrate breadth while also demonstrating the technical skills. So I think the reason that they might have looked at my LinkedIn profile was because I wrote it very much from the point of view of a consultant. So even though all my experience was programmer and developer experience, I wrote it more with talking about the projects I worked on where I was consulting.
Right.
The pitches that I did, the working with people, I wrote it from that lens. I don't know if that's why they selected it, but that's what I did, and that's how I ended up getting it.
So I guess what I'm hearing, for students, or I guess from Google, they care a lot about, the experiences, like hands-on stuff that you've done, not just necessarily schooling.
Yeah.
So if somebody's like a student, it's best for them to, get some projects under their belts if they don't have, let's say, internships or any full-time freelance work. So projects is probably like the best way for them to do some work, to be able to demonstrate like, hey, I can do this type of work, and here's the project to show that, right?
All of the screening interviews asked a lot about my projects. The later ones did not as much. They were more about your skills, like testing to know that you know your stuff.
Right.
The earlier ones were very much so about projects. Tell me about this project. What did you do? What was your role, etc.
Got it. So, and I guess like, so projects is important, as well as if you can get freelance and internship work. So now you're at Google, and you went into Google as a consultant.
Technical solutions consultant.
Technical solutions consultant.
Yeah.
What does a technical solutions consultant at Google do? And I guess what did you do in that role?
So there are a lot of different type of technical solutions consultants. At Google, that role is an umbrella role, where there's many different roles underneath it, and they all have wildly different expectations and experiences. So I can't necessarily answer what does a general technical solutions consultant do. What I did was I was the subset, which was called the technical account manager. So I was part of an account team for clients, and I was assigned to clients, and I worked with clients on their projects and on their business. The product that we used at Google was Google Ad Manager. So it was basically working with clients that used Google Ad Manager and helping them solve their business goals, business objectives, and working with them on technical projects in that space.
Got it. Did you ever want to kind of, I guess, switch from, because you said it's a big umbrella, there's different areas you could go as a technical solutions consultant. Did you ever want to like switch, go test a different area at Google, or did you like where you were working at the time?
So it's interesting. I chose that at Google because it was the least programming of all of them. When they selected me, they had selected me for a different one, which was called the customer solutions engineer, which was a significant amount of programming. Like it's like 70% they told me.
Wow. Okay.
And I basically told them, I said, I want to move more into a consultative route. And they couldn't really give me an answer. And it was after maybe the 7th or 8th interview that I basically told them, I said, look, I'm very happy to do this process, but I could get the offer. I will not sign it until I know what my actual role is going to be. So I need to talk to a manager because I can't actually, we're spending a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste your time and just tell you no, because at the end of the day, the role's not the one that I wanted.
That's pretty like impressive, I would say, of you to make that, conscious decision to say that. Because I feel like if it was me and Google had reached out, I would have been like, hey, whatever the job is, whatever it is, I'm taking it.
I was very firm. I'm like, look, I'm making a move from a job that was comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make that move unless the terms are good. And it's not just about the pay. So she found the person who would end up being my manager, and he managed TAMs, technical account managers. And he basically told me the role, and I asked him how much coding was there. He said 5 to 10%, but it's mostly consultative. And, if this is what you would want, we spoke. And at the end, he said, like, I would be happy to have you on my team. Of course, you have to get through the whole process. The managers don't have the final say necessarily, but he was like, if you end up getting through, I'd be happy to have you on my team. And that's when I told the recruiter, I said, yeah, I would sign an offer if it was as a technical account manager for this manager. I'm not going to sign any other offer.
Yeah. And
then I ended up getting it, and it was on that team, and I signed.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I hear a lot about Google, right? About especially like, the New York City office. I've been to the one in San Francisco. Is that their headquarters?
Mountain View.
Mountain View,
in the Bay Area.
So I want to know your favorite thing about working at Google.
Easy.
Okay.
It's the people.
The people.
The one thing that I can say with 100% certainty is Google has this magic of finding the best, nicest people. In general, all the people I worked with, even the ones that maybe we didn't have necessarily the best experience working together, they're all good, nice people who are really, really smart and good at what they do. So some of the most fun I've had, and some of my closest friends now, I met while working at Google. And it's an amazing place. It's like going to a playground almost of like all these geniuses, for lack of a better word, who are all actually really nice, good people, and they want to get to know you, and they're curious.
Right.
They're very, very curious in what you're doing in your free time. It's not just about work, and they're very happy to socialize and talk to you. And that's the best thing about Google by far.
Yeah.
It's being surrounded by people they lift you up in a lot of ways.
What does Google offer at the office? Because I hear
a lot of things.
Right. I hear a lot of things, and I want to confirm with you.
So it's office specific, but there's all the cafes, which basically it's free meals. You go there and they just cook food for you. Some of them are
all meals free, everything free.
So not all of them do all meals, but but whenever the meal is offered, it's free. So, some of the cafes do breakfast, lunch, dinner. Some only do lunch. All of them are themed. So, if you want, Chinese, or you want,
Mediterranean, Indian food.
Some offices don't have as wide of a range if they're smaller, but New York had like 12, I think. Yeah. Wow. So there's a lot of options. You have options, and they're open from a certain bracket. So you can go anytime, early or night. They have baristas there who make coffee for you. They have the gym there. They
have coffee shop there.
Yeah, literally.
Free gym.
Free gym. There's a massage benefit that you get where you get, I think like every year you get a certain amount of minutes with a masseuse that you could then book, and it's free included.
Wow.
There's what other amenities? The Google office in particular had a rock climbing wall if you wanted to do that. There were a lot of like creative spaces, lounges, cafes if you didn't want to work at your desk.
They offer so much, and I think it's
a lot.
That's probably like. And
there's a game room.
And a game room. It keeps adding on.
There's a game room with the DDR machine in it.
Wow.
And like the wall is like 4 TVs with like every console imaginable, going back even old too. So it's like you could just go there for like a break, 15, 20 minutes or more. At Google in general, your time is very unstructured by design. It's more about how you meet the objectives and the goals of your work.
It's like getting the work done.
If you're having a bad day and you really want to take an hour or two break, that's fine. Just make sure you get your work done.
Right. Get it done by the deadline. And
in that way, they treat you like adults.
Right. That's it's almost like the saying like play hard or work hard, play hard. So like Google is the best example of that because I imagine people do work really hard at Google, as you said, and the amount of amenities that they offer with free food, smoothies, drinks, coffee, all those things. Those are a lot of like, I guess, areas that bring headache and stress to people, having to come home, having to cook, having to go grocery shopping. Google's kind of just eliminating all of that stress and work that you have to do. And in return, you do good work for them there.
Yeah. They're trying to reduce as much of the friction as possible outside of what they can at work.
Yeah. So how long are you still at Google?
No, I'm not. I was part of the layoffs that happened a year and 2-3 months ago.
So how long were you at Google for your total time?
It was from February 2019 to January of 2023. So a little less than 4 years.
Got it. And during your time there, I guess we already talked about what you enjoyed the most and what you liked the most. Was there anything there that you wish you could have experienced or you could have done that you didn't get a chance to?
That I wished I could have done? I don't think so. I mean, amenities at work are nice, but for me, they've never really been something that's very attractive.
Right.
They're not a reason why I choose a job. For me, the value of the work that I do and the relationships I develop are the most important. So yeah, there's lots of things I didn't do. Like in the Mountain View office, there's a slide, I think, that you could ride down. And when people go visit, a lot of people are like, I want to ride down the slide. Like, honestly, I don't really care about that. There's a lot of cafes I didn't eat at.
I think that slide is in the movie The Internship.
Yeah, You've seen that movie, right? Yeah, it is.
Was that filmed there, or do you think that's a mimic, like something that mimicked?
I don't know. But the slide's real because I walked by it. Okay. I don't even know if you can ride on it anymore, you know, but it could be like a relic now that they have walled off. But I don't really care for amenities. It's more about the pay and the people. And I don't really know that there were things I didn't get to experience. The New York office throws this party once a year. Google holiday parties are crazy, as you could imagine, in a good way. They're very fun. The Google New York office has like a summer party that they do sometimes where they'll like rent out one of the piers and everyone from the New York office will go there and there's free food and drink. So it's like they do a lot of fun stuff like that. But I mean, I experienced all the stuff that I wanted to. And if there was something I didn't do, it's not the end of the world.
Right. So you mentioned that unfortunately that you got hit with the, layoffs that happened recently. And, I keep hearing it in the news, especially like the big tech giants, and some of the other big consulting firms as well. Overall, the big companies are all doing layoffs, every few months or so, starting like year or 2 years ago. How has your experience been? I know a lot of people that have dealt with the layoffs and are currently dealing with the layoffs. It's a tough time, right? How is your experience I've had friends that kind of try to take the time off, they're like, they stop kind of searching for a job. They're like, hey, I want to focus on myself right now. I know friends that as soon as they got laid off, the next day they've been searching for jobs, right? How has your experience been? Have you been trying to find the next opportunity, or are you taking time to yourself? And what is the market, I guess, looking from your point of view?
So when I got laid off, I was in the lucky position that I was actually kind of happy that I did, because the last couple months of my career at Google, I would have said were overall kind of negative. I had a lot of, paradoxically, some of my best experiences, but my overall feeling was negative because of just a lot of stuff going on with how the organization was changing that I really was not happy with. So I was already kind of unhappy. And in a sense, I was already kind of looking for something new when the layoffs happened. And then it's like, I told my friends at the time, I said, well, I'm going to miss working with all of you and seeing you every day. They're basically giving me enforced time off. How could I say no to that, right? Once I got laid off, I immediately started looking for something, but I was very choosy because I'm like, if I'm going to choose my next job, I want it to be a improvement over Google.
Right.
And I'm very selective and I'm very choosy. It has to be the right thing, or I'm not going to do it. So I've basically I'm still not working today. So I'm still, in a sense, working within the parameters of the system, living as best as I can, but traveling when possible. But I've been looking since the start. It's just, I have not yet found, in my case, I have not found the right thing yet.
The right fit. Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked with a bunch of companies and people, and there have been rooms for potential opportunities, but either the pay won't be right fit for me, or the role is not the right fit.
I think that's another important point that you touch on, is the fact that, don't rush into something, even though, getting laid off, feels really scary, and it's like, it's a tough time, but you have to realize like, hey, I can't just jump into something if it's not going to be the right fit, because like I can't go downwards, right? So you got to take your time and make sure that you find what's right for you, right company, improvement. So
of course, it's going to depend on your unique situation. If you're financially strapped, you don't have a choice.
Right.
And in that case, take something quick, but then look for a real thing after. Right.
Continue looking.
In my opinion, in the tech industry, short-term jobs are not really viewed negatively. And if they are, you shouldn't be working there.
Right.
That's very anachronistic to our current working culture. I would also say we spend so much time going from work to work to work, from school straight to work to job to job. If there's no time spent in between, it's very hard to know whether you still actually like and enjoy what you're doing, or if you're just following the momentum that you started years ago. And it's easy, and it's what you're used to and you're comfortable, so you keep doing it, but that might no longer register with where you are as a person anymore. And the only way to really know that is to not have that and to see how you feel. And if you miss it, and if you're constantly thinking to yourself like, oh, wow, like how much joy that gave me, how much this, then yeah, that's something, then you know I'm still on the right path, and that's something you should continue pursuing.
Yeah.
But you might also come to the realization, you know, I've just been doing this because I've just kept falling into the next thing. It's the momentum that's
Right.
carried me. This isn't actually what I want to do. And then you have to decide, do you go into a completely different direction? That might be difficult to start over, but you could still definitely do it. Or you say, you know, I don't necessarily want to keep doing this anymore, but I at the moment I want to continue.
Right.
There's a lot of, it's not all just about do I like this or not.
Yeah.
You could not like it. You might want to still do it because it's the best thing. You just have to be honest with yourself.
Of course. Yeah. That makes sense. And you know, next up, I want to quickly touch on this topic as we're talking about, you know, layoffs and, you know, how kind of the economy is changing, but as well as the workforce. I wanted to quickly touch on this. How do you think AI, you know, as it's being developed more, I feel like we're like in the middle of it right now. How do you think AI is going to affect, you know, whether help or not help the computer science area overall? You know, how do you think jobs are going to be impacted? Do you think for the better, for the worse?
AI is going to, in my opinion, this is all my opinion,
Yeah.
AI is going to affect the workforce very much in the same way the Industrial Revolution revolutionized work. It's going to eliminate jobs, but then create new ones that will be required to use it. Just like, oh, we're not going to have somebody on a factory line anymore. A machine is going to be doing that. We're going to need people to operate the machines.
Yeah.
So there will be jobs that will disappear. And that's just the reality of the evolution of work. There's nothing we could do about it. That doesn't mean that that person is like, it's a net negative and
Right.
a job's gone. There's going to need to be, with AI, there are going to be some bulk writing things that are going to disappear. If you look at like ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that those jobs are permanently gone, because we're going to need people who are trained to writing AI prompts to generate things
Yeah.
that will need to work in that space. And as that work becomes more easy for computers to do, it's going to scale it where we'll need more people at higher levels to manage and to scale that side of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not pessimistic about, you know, oh, I think that it's going to like kill jobs and that's it. But it is going to change jobs, and there will be some job roles that'll go away. But that's just an opportunity, if you would like to use that, to get into the space of working with AI as a tool to actually grow this movement we're having right now, where everyone is starting to adopt and use AI.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point of view. And I think when people are like kind of thinking about AI and scared of, you know, kind of losing their jobs or overall impacting negative way, like you said, you know, there's going to be more jobs that gets created essentially to take care of what the AI is making. To kind of wrap up, you know, our talk, I wanted to ask you if you could go back in time, and this can be kind of used as advice to the younger generation and people that were maybe in your shoe, you know, back then. What would you do differently if you were to go back in time, whether to high school time or college time? What would you do differently? And maybe you would do things the same, but if you were to do something differently, what would that be? And kids right now could use that as some advice.
It's very difficult for me to think right now on the top of my head what I would do differently, because I'm actually very happy with my life and my career trajectory so far. So
I guess what would you then suggest?
What would I
advice?
suggest?
Right.
So I could give a couple suggestions for people who want to go into computer science and then in working professionals in general. So
maybe an end goal at Google, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
So computer science in general, you, above all else, you need to be good at problem solving. That should, if you want to cultivate a skill for a career in computer science, you need to be good at problem solving. I've met many developers in my life who were very good at knowing things about programming languages. They knew more about programming languages than I did.
Yeah.
But then if I gave them a simple problem, they would have no idea how to solve it. And it's much better to be in the opposite boat. Because if you are a very good problem solver that is not that good with a programming language, you could use the problem solving as a crutch and look up things and look up resources to solve the problem. But if you don't know how to solve problems and you know a language, you're not going to be able to do anything.
Right.
So cultivate problem solving in whatever sense that is, whether that's studying mathematics, studying science, reading books on it. You have to become good at solving problems. That's the period end. You have to. The second thing I would say is it's not important to know everything.
Yeah.
In computer science, we tend to think of these geniuses who they know all these arcane details about computers and computer systems. That's, in my experience, pretty rare. And it's also not really possible. The field develops too quickly. It evolves too quickly. So you need to very specifically say, this is my field.
Yeah.
This is what I study. This is what I know. And if you don't know something, you could look it up and know how to look it up.
Yeah.
Know how to do research. You don't need to know, to be very technical for a moment, every single function call and method for something. But you should know where to find it to know how to use it.
Right.
That's more important. Those two things in my career have been foundational. And they've got me as far as I have.
Yeah.
So that's the things I would anchor on in computer science. As a working professional in general, the most important thing I would say is know your values and act on them and be honest. In my experience, a lot of people don't do that, and they disservice themselves in the process. You have to sometimes have hard conversations with people and be honest. Be nice and be kind, but be honest. You're doing more good for them than you are by not.
Yeah.
The person who just says yes to everything and yes, I'll do this project. Yes, I'll take this on. You're harming yourself and the company by doing that. You have to have your boundaries, and you have to sometimes say, you know what, I really don't think this is a good thing, or I actually didn't like the way we had that conversation. You have to be honest and have those conversations. One of the best conversations I had with my manager was when I started working with him, and he said to me, what's one thing you can tell me for working with me? For working together better. And I told him, don't ever ask me if I want to do a project, because the answer will always be no. and he laughed.
Yeah.
And he kind of was like, I think I know, but what do you mean? And I said, because I don't want to work. I'd like to, read and study. I'm a learner. I like to read. So if you ever ask me, do I want to do this project? The answer is going to be no, because I want to be honest with you so that I'm doing this to give value, because it's a valuable skill that you are paying me for.
Yeah.
Right? This is something I'm doing for you as an exchange because it's work. So no, I don't want to do this. I'd rather not do it. Now, if you then say to me instead, Marco, this is going to be very good for your career. Is this a project you would be, you could work on? My answer will always be yes, because I know that, you have to develop your career. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it. Right? So just be honest.
Yeah.
And be vulnerable enough to have that conversation, so you're not just a yes person.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll do this. Yes. I'll do this work for you. It's going to be good for the both of us, but it's not necessarily what I want to do.
Yeah.
Maybe if you do want to do it, then you can be honest and say, I really love doing this. This is the type of work I would want to do. So just be honest and sit on your values. You will then move closer to the people who will actually appreciate those values. And that, I think, is foundational. And that's how you actually become very happy and very satisfied.
Wow, that's amazing. And I appreciate that answer a lot. And I think, you said, problem solving is important, willingness to learn, and honesty. And I got to say, I appreciate your honesty through your stories that you've told, the level of honesty that you've kept with your employers. I very much appreciate that. And I'm sure there's thousands of kids, if not tens of thousands of kids out there that are going to listen to your advice and listen to your experiences, and they're going to be in your shoes, right? Or back when you were in that position, and they're going to be able to use this advice and hopefully, figure out what they love to do and kind of go through their career journey.
If I could summarize it in one sentence, I would say, if everyone wants to make people happy, don't change yourself to make other people happy and fit what they want. Find yourself and be happy in that. And then people who will make you happy will find you.
Wow. I love it. I mean, you couldn't have said any better.
That's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you having here today, and hopefully we'll have you back on again.
Absolutely.
For
I'd love
round
to.
2 later on, and we'll get more insight. Maybe once you start your next journey, whenever that time will be, and we'll get more insight of how that's going and everything, and we'll chat again.
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.